The gymnasium was packed. Fold-out chairs lined the waxed floor. Flags hung from the rafters. A small sign outside read, "Town Hall, open to all." Senator John Kennedy wasn't the main attraction that night, at least not at first. He had come to speak about veterans' support, to shake hands, to listen. But then, a boy stood up. He couldn't have been more than 12. Freckles, too big jacket. His voice shook when he asked the question, "Did you know my dad?" The room went still. Kennedy looked at him gently. "What's your name, son?" "Cody," the boy said. "My dad. He didn't come back." The words hit like a crack in glass. Quiet murmurs rippled through the audience. Cody blinked fast, trying to stay brave. "They said you were with him once, before it happened." Kennedy's face shifted. Not politician serious, human serious. He stepped away from the podium, walked down the steps slowly. Every step echoed. He knelt. "Your dad was Staff Sergeant Miller, wasn't he?" Cody nodded. Kennedy placed a hand on the boy's shoulder. "He was a damn good man." Cody tried to speak again, but his voice cracked. His chin trembled. And then it happened. Without hesitation, Kennedy pulled the boy into a hug. Not for show, not for cameras, not because it looked good, because it was good. The room, dead, silent. Grown men turned away to hide their eyes. Mothers clutched their children tighter. One veteran seated in the back simply whispered, "That's the real thing." Someone filmed it, but no one dared speak. Kennedy stood up, still holding Cody's hand, and with the crowd holding its breath, he said only one thing. "Your father's story doesn't end with a folded flag. It lives in you, and I'm here if you need help carrying it." That night, no one remembered the talking points. They remembered the moment. The town hall cleared out slowly that evening. People didn't talk much. They didn't need to. The air was thick with something heavier than applause, respect. Cody sat quietly near the back, his small hands still clinging to the folded program from the event. His eyes were red but calm, as if something had settled inside him after months of wait. Kennedy had already returned to the green room, avoiding press as usual. But as he packed his notes, his aide entered quietly. "There's something you should see, Senator," she said, handing him a creased envelope. The boy left this. Kennedy turned it over. Written in pencil, blocky and slanted, were the words, "For Mr. Kennedy, from Cody Miller." He opened it carefully. Inside was a short letter, spelled imperfectly but brave in tone. "Thank you for not acting like I was just another sad kid. That hug was the first thing that felt real in a long time. I think my dad would have liked you. I don't know what I want to be when I grow up, but today I saw something I want to be like." Kennedy folded the letter slowly. He didn't smile. He didn't frown. He just stared at the words for a long time, letting them soak in. The aide, trying to respect the silence, turned to leave, but Kennedy spoke softly. "Get me in touch with his mother." "Yes, sir." He stared out the window as the sun dipped over the small town's rooftops. His next stop was D.C. Policy, hearings, pressure, but that could wait, because something deeper had just happened. Something not written in policy or headlines. This wasn't about politics anymore. It was about a boy and a promise. 2 days later, in a modest kitchen outside Monroe, Louisiana, the phone rang. Cody's mother, Jenna Miller, wiped her hands on a towel and answered. Her voice was cautious, polite but worn thin by life. "Hello? Mrs. Miller, this is Senator John Kennedy." There was a pause, not because she didn't believe it, but because she did. "Oh, Senator, I didn't expect." "I read Cody's letter," he said gently. "And I want you to know, it wasn't just words. That boy has something special." Jenna exhaled slowly, her voice cracked. "He's been holding so much inside since his dad. Since we got the news, I didn't think anyone saw it." "I saw it," Kennedy said, "and I want to help." There was another pause. Longer. This time it wasn't disbelief, it was something like relief. A door opening after being locked too long. You don't have to do anything, Senator. He was just glad you saw him. That was enough. I don't do just enough, ma'am. Kennedy explained his plan. A scholarship foundation was already in motion. He'd fund the first part personally. Not for show, no press, no headlines, just Cody. He won't have to worry about school, not if I can help it, he said. He deserves a future with no walls in front of him. Jenna didn't cry, not then. But when she hung up the phone, she sat at the kitchen table in silence, her hand resting on the receiver like it was still warm. And Cody, sitting on the steps outside, didn't ask what the call was about. He didn't have to. He looked up at the sky and whispered, "Thanks, Dad." Inside, Jenna folded a note and placed it in a drawer next to a worn photo of Staff Sergeant Miller in uniform. Then she whispered too, "He's gonna be okay." 2 weeks later, the story quietly reached the Capitol, but not through a press release or a headline. It was whispered. One staffer told another, who heard it from someone in Veterans Affairs. "Did you hear what Kennedy did? No cameras, no donors, just did it." And like a stone dropped in still water, the ripples grew. Inside the Senate, Kennedy remained quiet about it. He didn't bring it up on the floor. He didn't mention Cody during speeches. But something in him had shifted, subtly, powerfully. You could hear it in how he spoke about service, about sacrifice. His words weren't theoretical anymore. They were rooted, grounded, personal. In a small committee meeting, while debating funding for veteran mental health programs, Kennedy leaned into the microphone and said, calm and direct, "If we forget what our soldiers carry home with them, we don't deserve the freedom they fought for." No drama, no grandstanding, just truth. Later, in the hallway, a fellow senator approached him. "You're different lately." "I'm just remembering what matters," Kennedy replied, adjusting his tie, eyes unreadable. Meanwhile, back in Monroe, Cody taped a photo to the inside of his locker. One of his dad, smiling in uniform, and another of him and Kennedy at the town hall. He didn't tell anyone about the scholarship. He didn't want to. It was his. One afternoon, after school, he sat at the local library reading aloud to a younger kid who struggled with words. When the librarian thanked him, Cody shrugged. "I just don't want him to feel invisible," he said. The librarian paused, smiled. "Sounds like someone I know." A month later, Kennedy found himself back in Louisiana, this time for a private veterans remembrance ceremony held in a rural cemetery outside of Baton Rouge. It wasn't televised, no podium, just folding chairs beneath gray skies and American flags rustling in the breeze. As he walked the rows of modest gravestones, his eyes paused on one. Staff Sergeant Allen Miller, beloved husband, father, and soldier Kennedy stood still for a moment. No words, no script. Then from behind, a voice spoke. "We come here every few Sundays." It was Jenna holding Cody's hand. She hadn't expected to see him, but she wasn't surprised either. "I thought you might." Cody wore a tie that was just a bit too short and clutched something under his arm. A notebook, well worn. "He writes letters to his dad," Jenna said softly. "Leaves them here sometimes." Kennedy looked at the boy. "Would you mind if I read one?" Cody hesitated, then nodded. He flipped the book open and handed it over. Kennedy's eyes scanned the page. "Hey, Dad. School's okay. Mom's tired but still smiles a lot. Senator Kennedy said you were brave. He says I'm brave too. I'm trying." Kennedy's fingers tightened slightly around the notebook. Then he handed it back, kneeling to look Cody in the eye. "You're doing more than trying, son. You're doing exactly what your dad would have wanted." The boy looked down, kicked the grass nervously. "You think he'd be proud?" "I don't think," Kennedy said. "I know." They stood there together, three people bound by memory, pain, and something unspoken but strong. Then Kennedy reached into his coat and pulled out a small medal in a velvet box. "This belonged to someone I served with," he said. He would have wanted a kid like you to have it. Cody opened the box, breath caught. Inside was a bronze service star, polished and simple. "I don't even know what to say," he whispered. "You don't have to," Kennedy said. Behind them, the wind picked up, rustling leaves and flag fabric. And for a moment, the silence didn't feel empty. It felt full. News of the cemetery visit didn't come from the media. It came from people. A photo, snapped quietly by another veteran at the service, showed Kennedy kneeling beside Cody, the medal glinting in the boy's hands. It wasn't shared with headlines or hashtags. It spread because people needed it to. In a world saturated with outrage, this was something different. Quiet strength, grace. At a VA hospital in New Orleans, an older Marine named Daryl watched the photo being passed around on a nurse's phone. "He didn't pose," Daryl muttered. "That's how you know it's real." Across the state, emails poured into Kennedy's office. Not about politics, but about people. "I haven't talked to my kid since I came home from Iraq. That story made me pick up the phone. I was going to quit counseling, then I read about what you did. I stayed. My daughter asked me why I cried reading Cody's letter. I told her it's because someone finally saw us." Meanwhile, Kennedy continued his work quietly. No fanfare. In committee rooms and one-on-one meetings, he pushed legislation to support veteran family counseling, child survivor support, and expanded grief assistance. When one senator challenged the budget implications, Kennedy looked him dead in the eye. "We send them off with flags and speeches. The least we can do is catch them when they fall." The chamber went quiet. Back in Monroe, Cody was invited to read a poem at the Memorial Day assembly. He stood behind the microphone, voice nervous but steady. "This is for my dad," he said, "and for anyone who misses someone they didn't get to say goodbye to." When he finished, there was no applause, just standing silence. A teacher wiped her eyes. A janitor saluted. Afterward, a girl from his class came up and said, "I didn't know you were that brave." Cody smiled. "I didn't either." Senator Kennedy didn't intend to speak that evening. The event was meant to honor local service members and families, a quiet gathering in a high school auditorium, not a campaign stop. But when the keynote speaker canceled last minute, a local organizer turned to Kennedy, seated discreetly in the back. "Senator, would you mind saying a few words?" He stood slowly. No notes, no teleprompter, just the quiet murmur of folding chairs and the weight of real lives in the room. He stepped up to the mic, paused, and looked out across the modest crowd. "I wasn't planning to speak tonight," he said. "But I've learned lately that some things can't be planned." A soft ripple of breath passed through the room. "Not long ago, I met a boy named Cody. He asked me if I knew his father, a soldier who didn't make it home. I told him I did, and I told him the truth, that his dad was brave, that he mattered, that bravery doesn't end when a uniform is folded up and handed to a widow. It keeps going, through the people who carry that memory forward." He paused again, voice quiet but firm. "We talk a lot in this country about strength, but strength isn't just force. Sometimes strength is a kid standing in a room full of strangers, holding back tears and asking if he's been forgotten." He looked directly at the veterans in the audience. "And it's our job to tell him, never. Not on our watch." The room stayed still, no rustling, no phones, just people listening. "I've served. I've seen war. I've buried friends. But what I saw in that boy's eyes, that is why I fight now. Not for headlines, not for votes, but for the kind of future where kids like Cody don't have to wonder if their sacrifice means anything." He stepped away from the microphone, and the silence was heavier than any applause. Then, slowly, a man in uniform stood, then another and another. One by one, the entire room rose, not in performance, but in quiet, unanimous understanding. A moment that wasn't planned, but would be remembered. A few weeks later, Kennedy received a letter in his Washington office, one not delivered by staffers or aides. It was handwritten, with a school logo on the top corner. Inside was a photo. Cody standing in front of a classroom whiteboard, beaming as he held up a certificate that read, Veteran Heritage Essay Winner. The letter was simple. Dear Senator Kennedy, I wrote about my dad. And about you. I said how remembering isn't just a day on a calendar, it's what we do. I think you helped me say it. Thank you for showing me that grown-ups can be heroes too. Cody. Kennedy read it twice, then slipped it into his breast pocket. He carried it into a closed-door meeting later that day on military budget reallocation. And when it came time to speak, he didn't raise his voice or gesture grandly. He simply stood, took out Cody's letter, and said, This is why we're here. Across the state of Louisiana, and then far beyond it, Cody's story became a quiet legend, not because of virality, not because of politics, but because it reminded people that service doesn't end at the battlefield, and neither does sacrifice. That summer, a new scholarship was launched in Sergeant Alan Miller's name, funded anonymously, but everyone knew where it came from. The mission was clear: support the children of fallen soldiers. No red tape, no questions, just help. At the ribbon-cutting ceremony, Kennedy didn't speak. He stood in the back, hand on Cody's shoulder as the boy held the scissors. It's yours now, Kennedy whispered. So is the story. Cody nodded, eyes shining. I won't let him down. You already haven't, Kennedy said. And as the ribbon fluttered to the ground and applause echoed over the open lawn, one thing was clear. The moment in that gymnasium wasn't a moment at all. It was the beginning of a legacy. Months passed. The leaves turned and fell. Veterans Day came again, this time with a new ceremony held at the very same gym where it had all begun. But something was different now. A newly installed plaque on the wall read, In honor of Staff Sergeant Alan Miller and all those who carried the weight after the war. Established by the Cody Miller Foundation, 2025. Cody, now taller, more confident, stood at the microphone. No trembling voice this time. He wore a suit that fit a little better and eyes that carried something far older than his age. I used to think stories like my dad's ended with a folded flag, he said to the packed gymnasium. But someone showed me that it can be the beginning. That pain can turn into something powerful. That being remembered isn't the same as being known. He looked toward the front row, where Senator Kennedy sat, arms folded, gaze steady. I want every kid who lost someone to know, your story matters too, even if it hurts, especially if it hurts. The applause was thunderous, but Cody didn't bask in it. He turned, stepped off the stage, and walked straight to Kennedy, hugging him the way he once did in reverse. I'm ready to help the next one, Cody whispered. Kennedy smiled. I know you are. Later, as the crowd dispersed, someone asked Kennedy how he felt seeing Cody now. Like watching a sunrise after the longest night, he replied. Back in D.C., Kennedy returned to the Senate floor, holding Cody's latest letter in his jacket. He still didn't mention it in speeches, still didn't seek attention, but he fought harder than ever for veterans, for their kids, for the invisible stories hiding in plain sight. Because now it wasn't just policy. It was personal. It was late. Kennedy sat alone in his Capitol Hill office, tie loosened, the soft hum of the city leaking in through the windows. The lights were dim, on purpose. He didn't need brightness. He needed clarity. On his desk was a small wooden box. Inside it, Cody's first letter, the photo from the gym, and the worn patch from Sergeant Alan Miller's old uniform, delivered 1 week earlier by Jenna, who'd said only, he would have wanted you to have it. Kennedy reached for the patch, turning it over in his hands. His fingers paused on a bit of fraying, as if trying to trace the miles of wear and meaning behind it. This wasn't just fabric. It was a life, a loss, and now, a legacy. His phone buzzed once, a text from his aide. Tomorrow's agenda. VA funding vote at 9 a.m. Networks asking for comment. He didn't reply. Instead, he stood and walked to the window. Below him, Washington moved like it always had, impatient, loud, endless. But in that moment, Kennedy stood still, and in his stillness was resolve. This story, Cody's story, wasn't going to be a one-off moment of compassion. It was going to change lives, and he was going to make damn sure of it. He turned off the lamp, tucked the patch into his pocket, and whispered to the room, "Let's get back to work." Because real service doesn't end when the applause fades. It begins in the silence that follows. And sometimes, that silence is the loudest thing in the world. Sometimes the most powerful moments aren't the loudest. They're the ones that happen quietly, when no one's watching. Senator Kennedy didn't make headlines that day. He made a difference. In a world that often forgets, he chose to remember. In a system that often looks away, he looked closer. And in one boy's silent pain, he saw a future worth fighting for. Because real leadership isn't just about policy, it's about people. Thank you for watching. If this story moved you, share it. Someone out there might need to know that they haven't been forgotten either. Subscribe for more true-to-life stories that reveal the quiet strength in unexpected places.